Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. Well, let's not contain my excitement any longer. Let's talk about recorded Twitter Spaces. So, I did the update last week, and host Celine Main had joined our space and had chatted about this big update that was coming up. And we all hoped that potentially recorded spaces would be involved in that update. And when I did the update, for me, it was there. I had the option to record people's spaces, or record our space, in fact, record spaces that I host, which is extremely exciting for me because it's something that I've been looking out for ever since I joined Spaces, for lots of different reasons. However, I am really sad, Madeline, that you don't have it.
I know. I thought by now I would already have it, and I don't. So I'm really bummed that when I've been hosting my rooms this past week, that I do not have the feature yet. But I know they're rolling it out, so hopefully it'll come soon. But I'm super excited you have it, because for all of our live listeners here in Spaces right now, you should see at the very top left side a little red dot that's pulsating that says REC for recording. So it's letting everybody know we're recording this right now.
We certainly are. And so I think as well, I mean, I'm really sad that I can't geek out over it with you, Madeline, because you haven't been able to test it. But what I will try and do is explain a little bit about what I've found out in testing it over the last week or so, over the last few days. I did create a threaded tweet during the week to try and share some screenshots of what I can see, how you set up the recorded space and the different options that you get with the various menus once you've got the recording feature. So essentially what you do is go to create your space as usual, where you're going to give it a title. You're now going to select up to 3 topics, which is really exciting too for the discoverability. But when I go to create my space, I now have this record space toggle switch. So I can choose whether or not I'm going to record the space. And if I want to, then obviously I can switch that on. I can still schedule the space for later, or I can start it straight off. But that toggle switch is the all-important button for recording spaces. Now, what that does is hopefully alerts everybody coming into the space that this is going to be a recorded space, with a screen that we did actually show a few weeks ago. I think we kind of spotted that in testing, that kind of alerts people to the fact that the space is going to be recorded. Once you're inside the space, as you've just mentioned, Madeline, you've got that red dot up in the top corner that's kind of pulsating, letting people know that it's being recorded. And really, once you're in the space and doing the thing, it's doing its thing, and there's not a lot you can do with it. I don't have any controls over it while we're in the space at all. One thing that I think would be quite useful potentially for hosts is to be able to pause the recording, maybe, and then restart it. I don't know whether or not that's something that they're thinking about doing, but it's certainly feedback that I'm going to give. Now, partly I think that because of the limited editing feature that you've really got with this. So when you finish the space, you're reminded that you're going to end your recording as well as finishing the space. And following that, you've got kind of a few options of things that you can do with the space once it's closed down. So one of those is to set a start point for the audio, but that is pretty much the only editing capability you've got. So potentially I could cut out kind of our setup and waffle at the beginning of All Things Audio so that nobody can hear that part of it, and set the start time kind of 2 or 3 minutes in, and that's where the audio file that is shared with other people will begin. So what I would like to be able to do the other end, as I say, is kind of like put an end point as well, potentially, because sometimes we'll close out our space but then still say goodbye to people, or there might be kind of an extra bit of conversation that we might not want to have in the podcast potentially. So that would be a neat thing to do. So if we had those kind of playback controls in the space, stop, pause, all those kind of things, I think that would be really, really useful. The other thing you can do once you've stopped your recording, you can share it out via tweet. You can share it via DM. You can delete your recording, which is quite important as well, if you don't want it to go anywhere or do anything. And a few of the tests that I've done, in fact, pretty much all of the tests that I've done, I've actually deleted and chosen not to share out with people, because a lot of them are me kind of either talking to myself or just talking to 2 or 3 people saying I'm testing this out. And it really wouldn't be that great content on my timeline particularly. It was more for me to kind of grab these screenshots and figure out really how recorded spaces worked. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting feature. It is only replay. Once you have finished your recording, it gives you a notification once that recording is ready for you to share out. And if you don't share it out from that notification, then it just sits there. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't appear on your timeline automatically. I think that's quite a good thing, because that gives you that option as the host to kind of decide when to share that recording out. You might not want to share it out straight away. You might want to wait a couple of days, or, there might be many reasons. You might want your podcast to come out first and then share it out on here as a supplement. Those kind of things to consider. So that was quite nice to know that it hadn't just kind of gone out automatically as well. Yeah, it's great. Ask me questions about it, Madeline. What do you want to know? And I'll try and answer your questions.
Well, your screenshots were amazing, Suze. I mean, you did this threaded tweet is so good. And just FYI for everyone here, we have it in the nest right now. We'll also have it in the show notes for the podcast version of this. But I also have a Twitter moment I've already created that has all the tweets we're going to talk about today. So you don't have to worry. You can always just, grab that later. I'll share it out in the nest when we're done with all of these. So that way you can always access it later. But Suze, you did just such a great job with this. You've really explained it in this threaded tweet, step by step, how this whole thing works. And I do love that there's an edit start time, because I think you're so right. I think many times when people are starting rooms, it might take a minute or two before they really dive into the content. And it's such a nice way to set a start time, so when somebody listens to the replay later, it can start right at that moment instead. Because, if it's just people just waiting, hey, everybody, we're going to wait a few minutes before we start. People that are doing the playback could get really bored real fast and not zoom ahead and not know where the starting point is and leave. So I'm really glad they went ahead and incorporated that right away.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking a little bit about since this went live that I hadn't sort of considered before, when you're creating this as a podcast as well, do you want to share it out, the same content on the timeline, and potentially lose listeners to Twitter that you're not going to be able to, at the moment, attribute as a listener to your podcast? Because at the moment, I don't have any kind of analytics around listens and that kind of thing. So, I mean, at the moment, it's it's a very few people that have got it. People are still getting used to it. I don't think it's going to make any massive dent in anyone's podcast listening. But I think for the future, it is definitely worth considering that and thinking about it. I talk a lot about podcast strategy, audio strategy. That's kind of my thing. And it's definitely something that I'm going to need to weave in, I think, over the next kind of 6 months to a year, around where's the best place for your podcast or your social audio recording to live and to be heard. And hopefully we will get some analytics, which in the end you could then put together if you wanted to with whatever analytics you get from your podcast host as well. But that's especially important for people who are looking to monetize their podcast content. Sponsors want to know how many people are listening. That's the reason why they will or won't want their name in your podcast. So I think it's just one of those things to it's kind of come up in my mind over the last few days around, it is great, but essentially we do need those stats and that analytics back from Twitter to really be able to understand what's going on with our content that we're creating.
Yeah, it's a great point. I don't think it's going to affect the number of podcast listeners. While I think it's great that we can have the replay, it's really the whole FOMO thing. Like if I missed for instance, when Twitter Spaces held their Q&A community meetup last week and I missed the beginning, I listened to what I could, and then I was able to do the playback and listen to the parts I missed, which was wonderful. I love that I could do that. But if someone's taking a room and spaces and turning it into a podcast, I'm more committed to listening to that podcast version. If it's a room I can't be in live, of course, I want that podcast version because you have so much more flexibility when you're listening to a podcast. I can stop, I can listen, you'll pick up right where I left off later. Many times when I listen to podcasts, it'll be when I'm out walking my dog or out driving. So usually I have to stop and start and stop and start several times. That's going to be a lot more difficult when you're listening to a playback of a room in spaces. What is going to happen? Like if I pause it, if I close out Twitter, then I guess when I come back into Twitter, then, I'm out of luck. I got to go find it. And I doubt it's going to save where I was at. So that's what I mean, where there's so much more flexibility when you're listening to something as a podcast, where you can easily stop, restart, things like that. I don't know. It's interesting. And I do hope we get some stats because that will be very helpful.
The other thing is around, at the moment, this is a replay. So there isn't any download feature for anyone to create a podcast particularly from it. However, you can rip the audio from the desktop playback if you kind of know how to do that. And I've discussed using things like Soundflower and Audio Hijack and all of that previously, those kind of desktop recording apps. But there isn't kind of a download feature. And whether or not Twitter will add that in, I don't know. Because as we've said before, it keeps listeners, it keeps users, it keeps people on the platform. And that is what they're going to be most interested in doing. So I think while as creators, we want to get creative with our audio and have that download and be able to put it wherever we like. It's, at the moment, that's kind of not a straightforward process. But then recording hasn't been a straightforward process all along unless you're really determined to do it, right, Madeline?
Yeah, definitely. But I hope we do get a downloaded file, like the host should be able to get a downloaded file, to be able to do what you want with. And I'm hoping at some point they're going to give that to us. You're able to record these, which is great. I've run into a lot of trouble recording a room as a whole. I mean, I've tried Sunflower. I've had a lot of issues with it, but for this as a podcast, of course, I can easily just record myself into my Zoom recorder, send that to you for to edit into a podcast. But I don't know. I would really love to see that ability to have, because look at DirectCon, that stats software we were using for a while for our rooms and spaces. And one of the features they added briefly, because then they took it away, because apparently Twitter didn't want them to do this, but very briefly, as soon as your room was over with all the stats you got, those real-time stats, which were awesome, they gave you an MP3 file of your whole room recorded, which was amazing. I didn't have to go download my Twitter data. As a power user on Twitter, trying to download my data is a nightmare. And I've yet to be able to get a really, get the audio that I need from it, from any of my recorded rooms. So I really liked how there was that ability briefly to get an MP3 through a third-party app. So my hope now is that Twitter will give that to us as the host.
Yeah, I certainly think that the host should be able to get access to their own created content, certainly. I mean, I'm going to talk about Backstage later. I can see Headliner Backstage actually in the space, which is another third-party app I've been using this week around recording as well. We're going to come to that shortly. But I think another thing that I've been asked actually since I've had the recording feature is, what's the quality like with the recording? And it's quite a difficult question to kind of answer because the quality is what it is. Like, on the way that Twitter Spaces and social audio works is that these audio files have to be very fast and very small. It has to be kind of quite poor quality in order to, it's a streaming quality, as we've spoken about before, this transport stream file. So it isn't, it is that streaming quality file. It's nothing more than that. And even when I'm recording a space and I'm recording a full frequency wave file, that isn't improving the quality. It's just capturing all it can of that poor quality file. So it is what it is. And, you're still reliant on those individual people's connections when they're speaking into the space, all of that kind of thing. However, I do feel like Spaces audio, and we've chatted about this before, Madeline, is quite good. And generally, we can hear each other and it does work quite well. And it is what it is. It's the way it has to be that way for the tech to work. So it's not like you're getting a full high quality, top resolutioned, full frequency file, because that's just not the way that social audio works. And until there's kind of a new grade of streaming file, it won't do. But it's good enough to use as a podcast. I think it would be acceptable. People are very aware that all of this is coming online. People listen to podcasts that have been recorded over Zoom, which is equally poor quality. So unless you're a complete and utter audio geek like you and me, then I don't think anyone's really going to notice, to be honest. So yeah, podcast away.
Well, that's like our really big news about Spaces with this whole recording feature. So it's super exciting. Now, a couple of things that came up right after we hosted this room last week. Like we always talk about this, seems like later during the day, when we do this every Wednesday, usually later Wednesday afternoon, things will come out from Spaces, from Twitter Spaces, if you follow their Twitter account. And this is one of them, or sometimes the next day. But there's always something new that we're uncovering as soon as we're hosting a room. And Twitter Spaces wants to make it easier for you to find more relevant rooms. Not everybody has the Spaces tab yet. I know that's, in a slow rollout right now. But they're just trying to get it out there to as many people as possible. I'm hearing more and more people are finally getting it. But now this new thing is where they're saying, and I've seen that, I don't know if you've noticed this, Suze, I've seen this a few times. It's not often, but every once in a while, when I'm just in the Explore or the Trending tab, if there's a popular room in Spaces going on, it'll just show up all of a sudden in my feed. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I had spotted that, but as you say, it's not there all the time. So it's obviously when a space kind of really takes off, it kind of pops into that little featured area. I think it's a great idea. It, again, anything that's going to boost the discoverability of Spaces for people has got to be a good thing. It would be, so many hosts that I know are creating really fantastic content, but actually when it comes to letting people know that it's there, it's a real challenge. So anything that Twitter can put in place that's going to help people find that content, I think has got to be a good thing.
And then the other thing, these were two, the one we just talked about and this new one I just stuck in the nest, were two tweets from Spaces literally as we were finishing our room last week, our live room here last week for All Things Audio. So they were saying that if you're on Android, they're testing the Spaces tab to a very small group. I don't know anyone that has it yet, but it's good to know that they are testing this for Android as well, not just iOS.
Yes, again, rolling things out across the different devices, widening it out for more people. It can only be a good thing, and yeah, just getting more people onto this onto the social audio and using it, really.
Absolutely. So that was like a lot of news this week for Twitter Spaces. So we actually have other exciting, you've got like some really cool stuff you want to talk about.
Yeah, there's lots of different things. So it's kind of going back to recording, really. I've been checking out Backstage by Headliner. Now, I really love Headliner for making audiograms. It is my go-to for making audiograms for the various podcasts that I produce and help with. So when I heard that they were doing something with social audio, I was really excited. And when I first looked at Backstage, it was just for Clubhouse. And so for a while, I kind of thought, I'm going to, keep an eye on it, see if they do anything with Twitter Spaces. And sure enough, we can now use it for Twitter Spaces as well. Now, what Backstage does is allows you to put in the URL of a Twitter space or a room, and you can schedule it basically to record that room or space when it goes live. And it will then give you not only a playback audio file, but also a transcript. And it's a very clever transcript as well. Now, the transcript is great. And, I work with audio, speech to text stuff all the time with the voice tech work that I do. And I really love Otter, usually for transcripts. But I've got to say, Headliner are doing a fantastic job. And that's not just because you're in the space. I can see you. I do really, really like the transcript. But this is a kind of interactive, dynamic transcript. And what you can do is highlight parts of the speech and then click on their clever little camera icon and it will make you a quick audiogram. Now, if anyone's not aware of what an audiogram is, these are the pieces of content that you might have seen on Twitter. To people use them mainly really to promote podcasts, and they'll have like an audio clip, maybe a moving waveform, hopefully some captions, an image, something branded usually, and it's a nice kind of tiny video file that you can pop up, and I call it thumb stopping, stop scrolling content, because they are still kind of few and far between, and I still think they catch people's eye and get people's attention. But what you can do is highlight the text that you want to be used, and it turns that into a really quick audiogram that you can then share out really easily. So it's got kind of a different a different outlook to some of the other ones that we've been looking at, Madeline, and it has got this recording. We were talking earlier about how Diracon had the MP3 that you could download. Now, this is it's a stereo file. It's an AAC file, which is the same format that iTunes use for music files. So it's a better for tech geeks. It's better quality than MP3, but it's basically a stereo file, and you can download that if you right click on it and save the audio. And I did it earlier and actually pulled that back into Audition, which is the software that I use. And that could equally be used as a podcast or for whatever you wanted to use it for. Now, my one flag on this is that while it is very, very clever, anyone can record anything. So let that sink in. It's not just the host here. You can record anything and the host won't know. Now, Headliner are very clear, and there are several messages within the app that say, don't go recording things without people's permission because it's not on. But I do fear for that being abused in some way. That does make me a little bit edgy about it. I recorded something from Clubhouse today just to see if I could or if I might get flagged, and it did record it, and I deleted it straight away because I felt so terrible, but that's very British of me, isn't it? But yes, anyone can record it and you don't have to declare it particularly. So I think this really opens up questions over the ownership of the audio, where the audio could end up, all of those kind of things. But I do really love it. As a host, I really like it. And I like the fact that it's got the transcript there. It's really cool, and it's got this extra added kind of bit where you can make that content straight from it. So yeah, it's a good one. I can't wait to see where it heads.
It sounds really great. I'm definitely going to check it out. So I'm so glad you found out about this and are sharing it today with us. I would definitely like to learn more. Maybe later when we're ready for Q&A, since they're here in the room with us, they could come chat with us and give us, some more information about it.
Yeah, I'd totally be up for that. And I think at the moment it's very early days for them. They're asking for feedback. It's up on the product launch website, and people are kind of telling each other about it, and not many people have kind of heard about it or are using it. Although I think Andrew, who's in the space, did actually tweet it out just as I did earlier, which was quite amusing. But yeah, I think it's kind of filtering through to the Twitter Spaces hosts community that it's there, and it will be good to see where it goes and where it ends up.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of Andrew, you came across one of his tweets that looked. I was really fascinated. I'm going to put this in the nest because this was very interesting stuff he shared with his awesome Spaces dashboard, which we talked a little bit about last week when he was here. But yeah, he made this video showing that that it looks like Twitter Spaces is testing the ability to schedule more than one space at a time. And he was able to see that CNN had 20 spaces scheduled through his dashboard, his Spaces dashboard. It was fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I mean, up until now, we are still only able to schedule one space at a time. I've yet to come across anyone that has been able to schedule more than one space. But clearly it's possible because CNN have done it. And Andrew's made this great little video that kind of shows it on Spaces dashboard. You can filter out, you can see, the live spaces, the latest, all of that kind of thing. And you can see the ones that are scheduled, which is super useful. Again, fantastic for discoverability. But what you can see on this video is one after the other, all with different URLs on different dates, all from CNN, around 20 of them. And yeah, for people that are hosting regular spaces like you and I, Madeline, not having to spin that up, every single week with a different thing, or being able to spin that up, but then have the other spaces. I know you host other spaces during the week. Being able to schedule those further ahead would be so useful. I know it's something that we've spoken about and heard from within the space that people are after and really want as well. So good to see it. And yeah, a nice bit of content there from Andrew with a little video and everything. So do check that out, bookmark it and check it out.
I'll be very happy when we can start scheduling multiple rooms because, I'm co-hosting 3 rooms a week. You're doing the hosting for this room, so I'm doing the other 2 of mine myself each week. And it's really frustrating because of the fact that we can only schedule one at a time, I have to wait till the room that I'm hosting is over and then I can schedule the next one. And being that there's 3 a week, it's like a dance. And I have to remember as soon as I'm done, go set up that next one so I can promote it until however many days I have until the next one. So it's going to be a really great day for those of us that schedule regular rooms, where we need that ability. So we don't have to sit here and it's a lot of time spent putting these together. And then we got some Clubhouse news to share. So a couple of things going on with Clubhouse that you've been paying close attention to.
Yeah, so there was a surprise town hall today, which was actually announced yesterday with a tweet, which I found quite funny. Surprise, we're doing this tomorrow. Don't miss it. It's at 1:00. Anyway, I joined that earlier and they announced local language support. So this is really exciting. Basically, they've rolling out the first phase of local language support on Android. It's rolling out to 13 languages. The list here: French, German, Hindi, Indonesian, Italian, Japanese, Kannada, Korean, Malayalam, Brazilian, Portuguese, Spanish, Tamil and Telugu. And they say that's just the beginning. They're going to add more languages and iOS support in the upcoming weeks and months. So, further explanation of that is that basically the app experience, so things like the prompts, the notifications, the topics and the descriptions will all be in the user's native language. So when someone new joins the app, all the onboarding, all of that kind of thing will all be in their native language and making lots of features kind of easier to understand.
Yeah, and Morgan had another tweet, I'll put that in the nest as well, where he's saying you can now pin links to the top of a Clubhouse room. We talked about it a little bit last week, but he actually put together this tweet with some examples of how he's seen it used. So it's a great threaded tweet, definitely worth checking out because people are using this in some really unique ways.
Yeah, they certainly are. Again, it's another screenshot-tastic thread that he's put together there, but just scrolling through it, the different ways that people are using the pinned links over on Clubhouse, really interesting. And it's good inspiration really for anyone that's thinking of setting up over on Clubhouse and thinking about using the feature. All kinds of things from sharing press releases, fundraisers, playlists, books, resources. Scroll through it. It's very exciting to see and really opens up the different content that people can use over there.
And we got Morgan here. Hey, Morgan.
Hi, both. I joined today with maybe a quick bit of follow-up about pinned links, but then some general thoughts about recording and replay. So the pinned links thing, one of the things that I wasn't able to add to this long screenshot-tastic thread was... So one of the interesting uses that I'm seeing is actually linking to other rooms on Clubhouse. And this is both kind of great fun, but also gets quite close to something that is called, I believe, the Twitch raid. I had to actually go and look this up because I'm not a big Twitch user. But it's kind of an extra sort of greater power, I suppose. So let's say you're in this space and you have a reasonable sized audience. And what you want to do is try and channel that audience to another space at the end. And, maybe this is not a work kind of show space, but when you're hanging out, so you have, you've got 30 people there, and then you all go and join someone else's space. And this might be, a fun thing or someone you're collaborating with, or maybe another space that you're trying to do that you want to get set up and get populated at the beginning. That's why I find that really interesting certainly in Clubhouse context, but I think generally is it somewhat democratizes how you do this. At the moment on Clubhouse, because of the way the algorithm works, it pays to have people on stage who have a large following at the start, which means that more people will get to see that room when it begins. But this is another way that you could send quite a few people to a room at the beginning and get that sort of audience going, which gives it visibility. So there's these kinds of like side effects of the pinned link that I think weren't really anticipated, but are kind of interesting uses. So this is the pinned link as a portal to other places on the app, other rooms, and indeed other like scheduled spaces. That's another thing. I mean, it's scheduled rooms. So being able to, at the end of your show, say, oh, by the way, we have a show next week. And rather than, pinning a link to that in the nest, which I guess at the moment you still can't do here if you're only able to schedule one space. But you would then, you would put the thing up and say, well, look, if anyone wants to come next week, you can just tap on this to RSVP and that's it. So it's just kind of making that experience inside the social audio space easy. That was really interesting. So the other quick thought on replays is nothing has been confirmed yet, but talking to, I guess, people in a position to know more, as you might expect, the level of interaction with these is really quite high. And I think this bodes really well for using, I'm sure you're already doing it, but using the nest and pin links as a way of channeling people to somewhere that's very useful for you. So you have a room full of people and you're able to really sort of contextualize why you're sharing this link, and why it's interesting or you care about it, or it might be somewhere where they go. And you're able to, in effect, send traffic somewhere else on the internet that is, to use the horrible jargon, kind of qualified, motivated traffic. And I think Clubhouse is seeing really high levels of engagement with that. So in terms of it being useful for creators monetizing or promoting something or even like fundraising, I think social audio combined with a link that points out is going to be really, really interesting. That will be the case here too. So yes, all these various ways people are trying to use it, I think that's going to be one of the real sort of hotspots, I think, for social audio when it becomes clear to other people how effective they are. So the quick thoughts on replay, which I think applies just as well to Spaces as Clubhouse. So I notice on Spaces that we now have the little animated thing next to live on the Spaces tab for those who have it. And I think it's probably quite clear that very soon we'll see replays, recorded spaces in the mix in the Discovery tab itself. And this is going to make, when you open the tab, what you want is something great to listen to. You really want to hunt. And that's really hard with live. But when you add replays into the mix, and you can do some kind of filtering or recommending based on your social graph, that gets a whole lot easier. So I'm absolutely sure we'll see that. And that will be very important for the tab. But one of the other things is that, as you've mentioned, Twitter haven't yet enabled creator downloads for the space, and you have to go to the player, which makes, I don't imagine this is why, but it does make you realize about the importance of the player view as like a visual space for Twitter and for the creators. And potentially, if things go well, your replay is actually where you're going to get the largest audience, and most people are going to visit that. So in terms of sponsorship or branding a space, or even at some point down the line having ad insertion, something that doesn't work for live, but does work for replays, we begin to realize that the player itself, this reanimated space, becomes really valuable real estate for Twitter, but also for the creator. And I assume that there would be some sort of revenue sharing model there. But just something to think about. There's a lot to think about with how replays change social audio as an experience and what they make possible. But I think that that's, as far as Twitter Spaces goes, that would be something that's really interesting to watch.
I agree 100%. Thank you for sharing your insights on this, Morgan. You always have such a great take on things.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bailey's joined us. Hi, Bailey.
Hey, how y'all doing? I wanted to pop up. I'm Bailey. I'm from Backstage. I'm the head of product over there. And thanks so much for talking about us and talking about what you like and also your concerns around Backstage. But we're super excited about it and would love to answer any questions or kind of tell y'all what's going on if you want.
I'd love to hear a comparison with Otter.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of the main point is as it is today, the comparison would be very similar. But one of the biggest differentiators between the two is we summarize. So we create these quick summarizations of the audio and say like, hey, here's these chapters that are listed out as sentences. And from there, we also allow you to create these share pages for replays. This is where it is now and where it's been for the past probably, I guess 3 months at this point and how we've got here. But the future of Backstage is beyond this utility of what it is today, which is similar to Otter. We're actually focusing a lot on replays and how we can use this technology that we have built from Headliner to find clips and really improve the replay experience. Right now, a lot of the conversation around replays they're related to podcasts and like how with a replay you can listen back and it's like, oh, here's this full entire audio of a live room. From feedback we've gotten and our kind of like general assumption is that replays of live audio aren't the same as podcasts. How people consume them and want to listen to them and the content that's in them is different than that of a podcast or any kind of social spoken word audio that's exists before. And our goal with Backstage is to create this space where you can replay social audio in a new way, in a way that's actually doesn't require, editing or creating the podcast or doing anything. It just filters out the social audio itself.
I think it's a game changer to be able to flag something that somebody just said that was a gem in real time, then go back and instantly clip it out without a whole lot of editing and Audacity and, just quickly, bang, lift it out, put it somewhere. That's a game changer.
I agree, George. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what's kind of the next plan for it, Bailey? You're kind of at this beta stage at the moment. What's next?
Yeah, we really kind of what I was mentioning. We're kind of we're moving to more of a consumption experience. So taking social audio and thinking, how can we make this the most discoverable? How can we make this audio shareable, clippable, and viral, right? Like there's so many amazing things happening in these audio rooms and all those spaces that are just being missed and left behind that people can learn from or have new viewpoints from. And we want to make sure and create a platform through Backstage where anyone could come and say, oh, I heard Sue, I love listening to Sue's talk. She knows so much about social audio. They could come to Backstage and say, I want to hear Sue's talk. And then it brings up all the clips that you've spoken in all the different rooms. So they can just listen to those or go back to the rooms you've been in. So kind of like taking audio from live rooms and making them searchable in a way, but also clippable and these short clips so you don't necessarily have to listen to the whole room to get to the good part.
Just wanted to ask Bailey about, I did obviously have some misgivings about the fact that anybody can put the URL into the app. Is that something that is going, is that something you guys are thinking about, or is that kind of on your radar as a concern?
Of course, we've talked a lot about it, especially with Clubhouse, which was where we launched. Recording was such a big concern in the Clubhouse community, and so we talked about how or if we should gate who was allowed to record rooms and leave it up to the host. But what we came down to is we didn't want to be the gatekeepers of who owned the audio or who owned their own voice. And there could be rooms where the host is recording the room, and I also want the part that I'm talking to be recorded. And we didn't believe that we should, at this stage, with very, very little abuse, we've shut down 2 accounts. But at this stage, we should stop people from having their own voice. Like, it is, at the end of the day, what I'm saying. And if I want to create a clip from this, then we didn't want to stop people from doing that. So as time goes on and we get more usage, if it becomes a bigger problem, we of course have ways to combat, or thinking through ways to combat how and who's allowed to record. Or if, for instance, like in this space, I had it recorded, we have that I spoke in it, then I can keep the recording. But if for some reason I didn't speak in it, then it's I don't own any part of this room, and could delete it. So definitely thinking of different ways that we can help and stop people from recording rooms that shouldn't be recorded.
That's really encouraging that you've only had kind of 2 incidents where you felt like you've needed to kind of pull the rug. I think that's, encouraging. Sorry, Madeline, go on.
Oh, well, I just shared a tweet in the Nest, and I think this is a perfect example of how this can be useful when it's not your own room. It's a tweet that you guys at Backstage retweeted from Andrew Warner, where he's saying that he loves listening to Kara Swisher, but he can't schedule his day around her live show. So with Headliner, he can go back and listen and see the show notes from it. So I think it's a great use for it when you can't be there live, but you still want to go ahead and get it recorded.
Yeah, it's exactly what I did at lunchtime with the surprise Clubhouse town hall earlier, because I couldn't listen in at 1 o'clock because I was in the middle of a work call. So I actually set it to record on Backstage by Headliner, and came back later on and found the bits that I wanted to know, read through it, listened to the audio back. Yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah, and hopefully as time goes on and more creators are recording their spaces and sharing them on the Backstage platform, you can just know that Andrew or Kara does record on or post on Backstage, and so the room will be there in this way that I like to consume the room. So hopefully as time goes on and more people are recording, then there won't be as much of a question of who and should be recording. The host will just be doing it themselves.
And Bailey, this is free, right? Because I just signed up and it said it was free.
Yeah, it's free.
If I could, I wanted to ask, so without saying too much about it, I think you're absolutely right that the interaction between clipping, a short shareable thing, and the replay is really interesting and important. And I think it's kind of so obviously important that you might see the platforms themselves building out this sort of thing. What kind of extra value do you see Headliner offering if, let's say, the other platforms built in a form of clipping and replay that plugged into their own social networks?
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's kind of, we've thought a lot during this process, what can we as Headliner do better, faster than Clubhouse, Twitter, or any of these other platforms. And we're really good at clipping. We're really good at making audiograms and clips. But on top of that, for the past couple of years, we've been building out Headliner's AI, which is smart clipping. So reading through audio and finding the actual good clips, taking an hour long, finding 10-minute clips of hey, this is what is good. So beyond just user-generated clips, which is important and great, we can also, in addition, provide clips hey, here's some clips already made for you, or these are the top clips from here.
Like a super word cloud.
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
An intelligent word cloud. Oh my God.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm going crazy.
Yeah, so in that way, someone who would use Backstage, they would be able to have these clips and share it on their page. So a listener who would come back and replay could hear the top hits in a way. Like here's what's trending now in this replay, as well as share those to any social quickly.
That's great. One last question there, but in terms of who's doing the clipping, do you see the emphasis more being on the creator and you're helping them find the good spots? Or do you see this more on the listener clipping and sharing?
So right now it's kind of in the balance. There's the host or the creator is where most of our clips come from now. We're moving in this next phase to using a lot more of our headliner AI that will be, hey, here are the clips, and pushing like, we've done it for you. This is all you need. Push it out. And that will be on our replay pages. And then from there, as we move forward, getting more into potentially live clipping, which would be something for the listener to do. So a combination is the real answer, but the backbone of it will be this automatic headliner AI that creates clips that can be shared quickly without much thinking. With Headliner, the company itself, that was our biggest problem that we heard from users in podcasting. They were like, we just don't know which clip to choose. Like, it caused so much angst that they just wouldn't create a clip because they couldn't decide on what clip to use. And so we're using that same kind of assumption here with automation, but it could be different, right? Since it is live and it is in that moment, it is like, oh yeah, this is it. That could be a social audio thing that is leading us down the path of in the moment clipping and live clipping and kind of what that looks like. But that's the live clipping is a little further down the road for us.
Excellent. Host Celine has his hand raised.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Great show as always. Fantastic update, Morgan, George, good contribution. Obviously, the dynamic duo doing their thing. Bailey, welcome to the community. Appreciate you coming in, doing your stuff. How do you determine quality of content for clips? What's the metric for that?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a very technical question that's kind of above my job description on the quality of clips. That goes back to our headliner AI, and they've been doing we have a really great couple of back-end engineers that have been training this model to just pick out good clips. And like I said, like that's good is subjective, which we realize. And so we've been training it now within the headliner product itself with people just saying yes or no. So we have a better, yes, this is a good clip, or no, I never want to see this clip again. So we have a better understanding there of what a good clip is. So I guess really that's very long to say, you never know. And so we'll build in features that allow users to help further train our AI to know what is and isn't a good clip by saying, no, I don't like this. This isn't a good clip, or seeing how fast they scroll past the clip or how many people engage with the clip to just further learn what people are interested in different topics and by different speakers to further create better clips. So all work in progress.
So like a Spotify, Netflix, YouTube, thumbs up, thumbs down type of thing, in addition to just the actual actions people take, is kind of like a rough estimate. As an engineer, I'm always looking to figure out the algorithm to determine how things work. Thus the question. I know it was kind of like a loaded question, but I was just curious to know your response to the question. The other piece, this is futuristic. I'm not sure if you're heading down this direction. It would be great because one of the sticking points with social audio, and we've talked about it numerous times in the Twitter Spaces community, is the essence of discovery. And in the example that we have above, Kara Swish is speaking, but he can't, his schedule doesn't allow. But if your schedule does allow, it would be great for a tool, maybe it's Headliner, I'm not sure the technical ramifications, to notify me when Kara Swisher is speaking, wherever she's speaking. Is there any kind of future talks about being able to get notified when a certain person is speaking on a social audio space?
Of course, yes. That's our goal, is to kind of be the home of social audio with Backstage. Pipe dreams right now. We're starting small with both Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces and building out consumption. But the idea is what you're saying, where you can potentially follow speakers and have it set where anytime, like you're mentioning, anytime they're speaking anywhere, that it would notify you, depending on who we've integrated with. But like, to use an example now, if Kara was speaking on either Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces, it would notify you like, hey, this person's speaking. So you could follow speakers, and then that would help obviously inform us on who you would even like to listen to, or topics you would like to listen to further help you discover clips. So when you go back to Backstage or whatever, we can also suggest more clips to you that could lead you to more replays of different spaces.
Hot topics, did you just say? Wow.
I have some breaking news. They've added another section to the Discovery tab. And I think this goes along the lines of their hope to add it to the trending section. I was in the process of sending out a tweet, and it'll come out just after this. But there's a happening now section. There's the other section is just for you. And there's a Spaces spotlight. So for what I've seen right now, if you go to your Spaces tab, the very top option is a Spaces spotlight. From what I see, it's only one Twitter Spaces happening now. Right now, it's Election Day 2021 recap by the USA Today appears for me. It's handpicked by yours truly. Listen now. That's the top one. Right after that, it's Spaces just for you. People you follow are tuning in now. So that's that. Then there is the happening now. Spaces are going on right now. And I noticed that there's a trending fire emoji next to those. I didn't see these particular spaces in the trending section of Twitter as they've indicated. I think this is one step closer to getting to that point of spaces being more prominent within the Twitter platform. So I'm not sure if other people are seeing this. I just noticed this while I was in the space. The other thing that hasn't been mentioned, and I talked to my homie Andrew about this, is in the record, and I posted it in the tweet, when you're listening to a replay or watching, in this particular case, a replay of a Twitter space, you could actually click on the avatar and go to the person's profile. So it's not a static video. It's actually a very dynamic video. Also, there used to be the capability, and I wish I got to look through my archives to see if I have the picture of the recording of this, that you could actually see pinned items in the nest as well. They had that there for, I don't know, a few hours, maybe max a day, but then they removed it from the replay of the space. So that was also very fascinating, because I was always, curious as to what happens to the pinned content in the nest. They had it there for a few, they removed it, but you could click on the avatar of all the speakers that you see in the replay, and you could go to their profile. Don't know if you knew about that. I tweeted it out like last week or something, but extra info.
A very quick follow-up on that as well. It absolutely isn't a video. What we're seeing is just the metadata of the room attached to the audio, which is reanimating the code that generates the space, which is also a thing that you can use in future if you want to implement clipping. It's what Clubhouse does with their clipping thing. They use the metadata to generate something that can be shared. But yeah.
Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us, and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.